In a state so corrupt that the governor would actually be arrested, convicted, and sent to the feds, the poorly underfunded cities such as New Orleans would suffer with extremely high violent crime and murder rates, so high that one would question the survival rate of young black teens raised in these environments.
Edwards checked himself into the penitentiary carrying only a few personal possessions.
This is a list of prospective visitors, a list of people that I want to put on my telephone list, receipt for the fines and forfeitures which I paid, some medical records.
Is that a Bible?
A Bible which my son David gave me.
He has a number of goals for the next 10 years, first and foremost, following the rules.
Absent some intervention by the United States Supreme Court, I will complete my prison term in accordance with the rules and regulations.
But make no mistake, while he spends the next decade behind barbed wire, the former governor will keep a watchful eye on the U.S. Supreme Court.
I'm optimistic because what happened to me has only happened in the 5th District.
He also plans to write his autobiography with the help of a ghostwriter.
I'm going to spend my time going into the personal aspect of it, starting with my birth up until now.
What are you calling it?
What's that?
What's the title? What are you going to call your book?
I haven't decided yet. Depends how I'm going to end it.
Edwards is also asking anyone who wants to write to him to do so while he's in jail.
I don't have any delusions that I can hide where I am or why I'm here, so it's perfectly all right with me if they know.
As he went into prison today, Edwin Edwards was flanked not by his wife Candy, but by son David as he began the first day of the rest of his life. He is now the second governor to spend time in a federal pen following Richard Lesh. And aside from working on his autobiography, Edwards will have to take a job inside the prison, perhaps in the prison sign shop. The pay for such a job is 12 cents an hour. Edwards at this hour is probably also finding out exactly what his room assignment will be. Out of a prison population of 1,500, there are 33 individual cells inside, so more than likely he'll be in a dormitory with several other prisoners, most of whom are in here on drug offenses. This is where he will be for the next 10 years unless he gets out earlier, perhaps in 8.5 years if he is the model prisoner, which today he professed he will be.
This story is about the son of a strong and resilient black woman who beat the odds as she did her best to raise her young boys. Derrick Leon Williams, born December the 15th of 1980 to Miss Dorothy Harris in Alexandria, Louisiana, was named after Miss Dorothy's uncle, her mother's brother. Never in a million years would Miss Dorothy believe that her worst nightmare would come to reality. Derrick Williams, aka Lil Derrick, aka Bulletproof, aka BG Derrick, would tragically lose his life at the age of 21 on Halloween night of 2002. As a young child, Derrick kept a smile on his face. His fun-loving charm and chubby size would earn him the nickname Baby Huey when he was merely an infant. When Derrick was still a toddler, his father was sentenced to 10 years in Angola State Penitentiary. While Derrick was still a baby, despite the trauma that she had went through with Derrick's father, Miss Dorothy would do the honorable thing by taking the very young Derrick to visit his father in Angola. Derrick grew to be self-confident at an early age. He was never one afraid to speak his mind, saying how he really felt. The older people called it shooting from the hip. Derrick's stay in Alexandria would, however, be short-lived, as his mom's family would eventually talk her into bringing Derrick to New Orleans. It wouldn't be long before Miss Dorothy would get all of her business straight, tying up all of her loose ends in Alexandria, moving to the NO. Although Derrick came up in the 10th Ward, contrary to popular belief, Derrick never lived in the St. Thomas Project. Derrick did, however, at one point live at 1021 Melpomene Street, right by the scatter sites in the 10th Ward. In his adolescent years, Derrick, like most teens coming up in the mean streets of New Orleans, started hustling and running the streets, hanging with the dudes out the Thomas. One thing for sure, two things for certain. Derrick represented that 10th to the bone gristle. There was no denying that he was 10 ward for sure. What separates Miss Dorothy from most mothers is that she was never in denial to her son's alleged activities in the streets. Most parents raising kids in harsh environments define their kids as total angels, which actually aids and abets the behavior. One thing about Miss Dorothy, she would, however, never allow anyone to slander Derrick's name. With that being said, there's only so much that we as parents can do to lead our kids on the straight and narrow path. At the end of the day, it is ultimately their decision to make. Hip-hop had taken New Orleans by storm in the early to mid-80s. Dudes from every hood were trying their hands at rap. Derrick would be one of those dudes. What set Derrick aside from most was that he was actually good at rapping. Before long, Derrick's skills would catch the ear of his uncle, Brian Williams, aka Baby of Cash Money Records. This would ultimately lead to Derrick being on several songs with Cash Money artists. Derrick would even at one point be recognized as the fifth hot boy. Unfortunately, this would not last long, as Derrick, who was in the streets, had influence over Baby's artists. Peer pressure to run the streets with Derrick would lead them to missing out on studio time. Baby didn't like this one bit and would begin to duck and dodge Derrick, switching studios so that Derrick would not know where they were. No longer able to pop up at the studio due to Baby making moves to duck him, Derrick would eventually stop trying to link with CMR artists. Realizing that he needed to make his own moves, Derrick linked with Deshaun and Smoked Out Records, recording their first tracks with Fire on the Bayou in the New Orleans East. Feeling like Derrick had started to take the music thing serious, Baby would eventually reach out to do a track with Derrick featuring himself and Lil Wayne. This would not come at a cheap price, as Baby demanded 70 racks from Deshaun for the features. This track would help to land Smoked Out Records a distribution deal. However, just as the single was gaining momentum, Deshaun got popped and caught a Joe's. Looking to ride the wave of the momentum he had created, Derrick started looking for other avenues to push his music. It wouldn't be long before Derrick, Scope, Butch, and Chuck would launch Undisputed, later dropping a compilation album featuring Chaotic and Derrick that had the streets of New Orleans on fire. Surprisingly, while Deshaun was locked up, he had gotten a $2 million offer from Def Jam South. It was then that he would attempt to convince Derrick. The details of what actually happened after that seemed sketchy. Derrick allegedly shut it down because he was once again rocking with Cash Money Records. I'm pretty sure this missed opportunity pissed off the other parties involved. It was at this point that Derrick should have cut ties with all of them dudes. The fix was definitely in. Halfway in and halfway out of the streets, it was starting to look like Derrick had finally caught his big break. Before he could make any moves, in an unfortunate turn of events, Derrick Leon Williams, aka BG Derrick, would lose his life as soon as things had started to take off. Shortly after Derrick was killed, Sko 2 was murdered while he was out doing promo work for the label. Years later, Butch would also be murdered downtown on Claiborne Avenue, allegedly behind a beef with the St. Bernard Project. The news article from NOLA.com read as follows: those who wanted Robert Pittman dead finally caught up with him on Easter as he was seated in his truck after partying at a nightclub. The murder near Orleans and North Claiborne Avenues fell within 7 square miles of the city that police targeted as a hot zone. After the number of killings skyrocketed in early 2003, Robert Pittman was the year's 85th murder. More specifically, his death was one in a rash of killings that police associated with a turf war that simmered after the St. Thomas public housing development was torn down and its residents scattered to other public housing sites, particularly the St. Bernard Project. According to his mother, Butch was a marked man once police arrested him in 2002 and accused him of killing Alfred Edwards and wounding one other man in June in the St. Bernard housing complex. The Edwards and Pittman's families say the bloodshed stemmed from the downtown-uptown rivalry among drug dealers that grew deadlier as foes found themselves living cheek to cheek in the St. Bernard development. Not much has ever been said about the death of Chuck. It was rumored that he died of natural causes. "20 years later, a chilling revelation would take the internet by storm and shock the world. In an interview on YouTube, Derrick's former label owner would seemingly give details on the real behind-the-scenes events that took place with Undisputed and what actually led to Derrick's murder. In that interview, he would start by saying while in the studio recording the album for Undisputed, Derrick allegedly upped a burner on Chaotic out the yo, letting him know that he was really from the streets. This would obviously bring tension to the situation, as Chaotic himself was also about that foolishness. Ray Charles can see that whenever you have a group of real street dudes in the same room, all on different types of time, shit never ends up good. Real slimeball shit was going on. Sko even went with the move on Soulja Slim, playing him out of 5 racks, basically getting Slim to drop a verse without paying him the 5 racks that they agreed on. Let's move on. Black Troy, Sko's brother, who had not too long ago come home from doing a Joe's, was wilding in the streets. It wouldn't be long before Derrick and Troy were running head up solely on the strength of Sko, ultimately ending up hitting a lick on the gambling shack downtown, coming up on 80 racks that they would split. During this time, the streets of New Orleans were filled with violence, drugs, and murder at an alarming rate.
A television repairman discovered a body inside a Lakeview apartment building this afternoon. Police say the man was working in the 5900 block of Milne Boulevard when he noticed the victim, 42-year-old John Pettigrew, lying in the doorway of his fiancee's home. Pettigrew had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. Detectives say there were signs of forced entry inside the apartment and some property might have been stolen. Anyone with information on this crime is asked to call Crime Stoppers at 822-1111.
Baby D, a well-known dude out the Mouth, was murdered around this same time frame. Derrick, who had been picked up on an entirely different charge, was allegedly in the parish claiming that he had put in the work on Baby D, although it wasn't him who had committed the murder. It was no problem for the cutthroat backdoor snake shit to go down in the streets of New Orleans. Buku dudes have fallen victim to this exact mindset that would forever delete them from the streets. Like the old saying goes, nothing beats the double cross but the triple cross, and when Derrick came home, he was totally in the blind, making moves with the exact dudes who wanted him gone. It was alleged that Black Troy, who Derrick was running with thick and thin, pulling off acts, was the person who would ultimately end up taking his life. The streets have a funny way of imposing its own justice. What goes around comes around, and Black Troy himself would be murdered. The streets are undefeated.